Oh, my boy, my poor boy. But then also, hey, my other boy. But yes, there is some work to do regarding these regulations. They do need quite a bit of tweaking, and Stefano Domenicali calling Max and the like wrong to disclose this publicly, not the right move, mate. Read the room. We'll save all that for a proper discussion maybe tomorrow, folks, so subscribe for that. There are still obvious battery issues, but the first race didn't look like a funeral march. For starters, 17 of the cars finished, and the racing wasn't a total write-off. It already seems less catastrophic than many predicted. I would say the overall read is no longer overwhelmingly negative, but yes, Formula One has got a lot of convincing to do, and they really do need to talk to the drivers about this, they really do. Yes, the drivers have described this artificial, and Charles once again likened it to Mario Kart, just as Kimi Antonelli dropped a green shell in qualifying. I do think there'll be some improvements, there will be some refinements. This will be the worst version of these regulations you will see. But that's all I can really say. Either you like it or you don't. I'm not here to insult your intelligence or anything. You do you. But one thing I'm really quite intrigued about is I don't hear the FIA president himself yapping on about these regulations. He's been very quiet, hasn't he? He usually can't stop talking about Formula One. Who knows? Maybe his pitch last year of getting V8s into F1 sooner rather than later might come right back round again. But one thing I must really point out here is that Aston Martin did not, as we thought earlier in the week, just keel over and die, trying to do the bare minimum and just avoid doing any participation. No, they had to go to the stewards to convince that Lance Stroll was good enough to compete. Fernando Alonso was acting like essentially the Undertaker of retiring, then 10 laps later he comes back in again. Aston Martin were trying to get some valuable data. They really did improve a lot this weekend. Granted, Fernando did ultimately retire and Lance was not classified, being 15 laps behind, but it is a symbolic thing for Lance to not classify instead of having a DNF. They at least tried to keep going. That's something, I suppose. Alonso said after qualifying that there was potential in the car, but also admitted the team was short on batteries and couldn't risk doing too much in the race. Although, according to many within, they might have more supplies in time for China. And Koji Watanabe recently said that by Suzuka, they might have a cure. In fact, it's their imperative to find one for Honda's home race. And yes, Lance Stroll only got, I think, 16 laps in before the race itself to try and dial himself in. So the fact he got out there at all, and like his teammate, was just going in and out like the hokey cokey, but he was very much describing racing as circulating. He is not mincing his words, Lance. All they're doing right now is gathering data, trying to find out what the extent of these vibrations are after patches in Bahrain, and just seeing if there is indeed potential within the car. It will improve in time. They are at least trying. I thought for a moment that we were going to be getting a situation where Aston Martin were going to abandon Honda and maybe look to Audi. I mean, I did see Adrian Newey with his notebook around that Audi car and asking, how did that, like, he's really intrigued about that team. Possible customer if it really goes bad with Honda. But yeah, that's a spanner speculation for now. But Aston Martin, at least they tried. And then Piastri, I'm not gonna lie, that hurt me in my very soul. Considering how much Norris was able to adapt over the race, it does make you wonder how much Piastri would have been able to find as many facts too. Very vital at the beginning of the regulations if you want to try and impose your will on the car's development. However, it wasn't to be. Afterwards, he put it down to a combination of bad factors, including cold tyres, and an unexpected power delivery spike around a certain corner when he got on the curbs. But he also owned it and apologised to the crowd, and that honesty will be appreciated because he had been looking quite promising to be the lead McLaren up until then. And one thing has become very, very clear is that McLaren fans have a very short memory. This, to me, reminds me of McLaren's situation in 2024. They were not the best of the pack at the beginning. It was only around the Miami package when you could suddenly say, yeah, they are the best right now. And then it was all uphill from there. I trust in McLaren being able to develop their way out of the problem and get on top of the various software bugs and implementation issues. Once again, we are seeing a homeboy have a jinx. This really reminds me of the Interlagos curse that Rubens Barrichello had. It just got comical toward the end. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I really do feel for Oscar. He definitely had a better initial grasp of these cars, but Lando has indeed caught up, so this might count for a lot in China. And the stinging does not stop there, my friend, because as I was celebrating one Audi driver having a good day, the other Audi driver, Nico Hülkenberg, man, in an almost similar situation to what Gabi had in qualifying yesterday. The car just suddenly conked out. There was nothing really they could do, and even though they did make it to the grid, they did eventually have to wheel that car back into the pit lane. That was painful to see. Just imagine, this could have been a double points finish for Audi on debut. Just imagine that. I mean, oh well. They still are investigating the issue, though. They haven't really found the cause yet. But from a team-building point of view, there is still value in the fact that he was sounding pretty calm rather than getting melodramatic. His role this year, Nikos, is to be the adult in the room whilst Audi stitches the program together, and Garby builds on all of the momentum he gained from last year. Melbourne showed that he can still lead and not get himself in a flap. He certainly had a lot better time of it in qualifying than he did last year and many times in 2025. But it also showed that even though Audi has improved in reliability, there are still issues. And the same can be said for Isack Hadjar. Whilst many will laugh at my video yesterday saying it's aged like raw chicken, the curse hasn't gone at all, this car has a brand new power unit in it, and whilst it's exceeded expectations in terms of pace and reliability, I mean, you've only got to look at what happened at Racing Bulls, it's still not the absolute definite article yet. We should commend Isack for stepping up to the plate. Considering that Max Verstappen was taking out of qualifying, there'd have been huge pressure on the Frenchman's shoulders to do the business, and it also shows Red Bull, if things continue to improve and Isack continues his momentum, they may have a second car in the top 10 to throw a cat amongst the pigeons, as in maybe giving McLaren a bit of bother, and if they continue to improve, maybe even the Mercedes and the Ferrari. They are not basically competing with one arm tied behind their back, stuck down in 20th. This is nothing like Australia last year. Yes, he wasn't able to keep up with the Mercedes, and he had some duking it out with Arvid, but he was doing his best. Him then saying at the end it was very frustrating he didn't make it, and that he felt a podium might have been possible. That may sound ambitious, but given his starting place, I don't think that would be fantasy for him to say. He's been able to gain a fair amount of credibility, Isack. This is very much a good thing for him, even though he did lose out. And yes, Cadillac did lose out after having one car retire. It was rocky this weekend, but it was otherwise informative. But it wasn't without error. We had both wing mirrors falling off the Cadillac. I believe Perez's right one and then Valtteri's left one, so you had the complete set just strewn around the track. I think they had sensor problems as well. Perez span around on occasion. He also duked it out with Lawson, so he was already reigniting the drama he had with the Kiwi from in 2024. They were just stitching things together. That is somewhat forgivable. I do think that Cadillac right here, they're not a clueless organization. It's just they need to build up some more experience because, put simply, this team is brand new, even though they have a Ferrari power unit. They are very much the greenhorns of Formula One, even more so than Audi. At least they've got a foundation in Hinwil to fall back on, like BMW did in 2006. And team principal Graham Loudon were always going to be judged less on instant pace than on whether the project looked structurally serious. And I think they do. It was painful, but they at least came around and got to the end. Points for trying and getting within 107%. But for Carlos Sainz, this weekend in Melbourne was not much better than his first one. Only one full session in practice to get under his belt, and then another issue in FP3, that ruled him out of qualifying altogether. And his own reaction was frustration more than drama, which fits the situation perfectly. A lack of usable track time. At the end of the day, all that he could get out of it was 15th, and it does very much remind me of the conversation he had with Fernando Alonso, in that, yes, he is annoyed with where Williams is right now, but the only thing that matters to him is where the team goes from there. What's their action plan? Hopefully, they've gained some data from this weekend, but this has not been the best start. At least last year, he provided some sort of partial effort in securing Albon's place in the top 5. Here, though, no heroics this time. And very much like with Piastri, what we managed to prove from Williams is that Albon was the one that came in clutch in trying to gain some useful data. That's what James Vowles said. This was all about trying to find some facts. I think they brought some upgrades this weekend to see whether or not they actually did anything. And ultimately, with a brand new regulation cycle, Sainz has managed to not get as much mileage as Albon did. Albon, like he did last year, has gotten the biggest advantage first. So for Carlos, next week, China, he just needs to have a clean weekend. That's all he needs to do. I don't think he needs to have to rely on heroics. He just needs to have a weekend where he can actually get proper sessions in, especially considering it's a sprint. And then Franco Colapinto is in here too. But I will say one thing. His lightning reactions are legendary. How he managed to avoid having a crash, either against Liam Lawson's stranded car or in the wall, this is a legendary save. Abso-frickin-lutely. But for Colapinto, this weekend was trying to impose himself as a potential point scorer. But unfortunately for him, and with the car, and getting a lot of dry ice in the eye around free practice, this was not a weekend where he could really gain any momentum, and Pierre Gasly scoring a point whilst he didn't, that's not going to help either. But the good news is that there was no major headline collapse or anything like that. I know you're going to be pointing out the Lewis incident in pre-practice, but if you looked at the steward's notes, it was something that he was told to do by his team. But the bad news for Franco is that he was relatively anonymous, and it certainly didn't help due to the start infringement that he ended up with a stop-go, which meant that he really didn't have any opportunity to try and get in touch with Albon in 12th or Ocon in 11th. And another salvo for him is that Alex Dunn, the new Alpine Academy recruit, he didn't do himself any favours in F2 by colliding with his own teammate at Rodin, and that setting the tone with that partnership. Oh, yeah, Alex once again getting himself into a tangle. That might have saved Franco a lot of grief. Franco did not do anything close to that. And then Liam Lawson. If I were Liam Lawson right now, I'd be a little bit worried. Because not only was his rookie teammate gathering headlines and finished ahead of him, Red Bull's F2 driver Nicolas Soloff won the feature race, staking his own claim on that series title, meaning a path toward Formula 1 might be afforded to him since you can't remain in F2 if you win the title there. Yet Liam only came home 13th after bogging down at the start. He never looked like a real threat of getting back into the top 10 either. Very critical, because Racing Bull suddenly looks like the sort of team where both drivers could realistically score on a fairly regular basis. Far better than in testing. And it certainly didn't help that Checo gave him a drubbing and a reminder of their beef from back in 2024. And honestly, the final classification about where the drivers are in the top 10, that may not be the biggest story at this team. It might be down to simply the intra-team competition. If Lindblad keeps doing this, duking it out with champions, and doing it relatively cleanly, not giving Max a really easy ride through the order, banging wheels with Lewis Hamilton, this is the kind of stuff that Liam's simply not doing right now. It might lead him to being cast as the defender as he was in 2025, taking one for the team, so that means his rookie teammate could go on to maybe score points higher up, like we saw especially around Monaco in 2025 with Isack and Liam. Now we get to the mess section, and for Alex Albon, this is where he resides, because this was not a glorious weekend for him, even though a P12 was respectable. This was a functional one for him doing the majority of the legwork since Carlos Sainz. Well, I mean, for him, it was just one issue after another issue. But there was plenty learned. It may sound bland to you, though in the context of a brand new rule set, and this being James's Williams, does he care if it wasn't spicy this weekend? Hell no! Alex gave Williams a fair bit to work with, but at the same time, he never looked likely of dragging something special out of the car. This instead was the moment for Albon to give the team a clean benchmark going forward. He did that and nothing more. They leave this weekend with valuable data. That's all they've got, really. And then we have Esteban Ocon, who finished one place ahead of the Thai driver in 11th. And for him, this might have been quite hopeful, but it was also probably incredibly frustrating. He made progress just like his teammate, but he didn't come away with a point. He was quite happy with the car though, him saying it wasn't miles off the order and actually providing a really good solid benchmark, and the execution of the team certainly better than it was expected to be. And he said if he can just get the energy deployment down, and he's openly admitted it's just been bamboozling his brain for a long time now, he might actually be able to get even further up the order and give Oliver Behrman a little bit of a hard time. And also, I believe he cited in Q3, or at least going into Q3, his team had a rear downforce issue which hindered his final Q2 run, so he might have actually made it after all, unlike his teammate, and therefore points might have been his after all. But the underlying picture's encouraging. The team has pace, and both drivers were competitive. And his comments sounded like those of somebody already understanding how to get something out of these cars, which he said are complicated. And considering he got P5 last year in China, if he can learn more, I think he could score points there this year too. This weekend for him, it was a near miss, but Haas definitely looked solid. Whilst with Norris, he left Melbourne calling upon his team to work quite a lot on the MCL40, but as time progressed, his speed and understanding of the car did improve, his time matching that of the leaders by the end of it. However, that build-up was not enough to get him back in touch with the top four. By the end of the race, he was almost a full minute behind them, so even though this might give him some hope for future races, and McLaren are a real dab hand when it comes to development, this was not the campaign statement that he wished to be giving, him being the defending champion. And Lando openly admitted that he was struggling to try and manage everything on his steering wheel for a sizable distance. So at least he's being honest and open about what he was going through with the car. That will stand him in good stead, and McLaren will learn a lot from that, especially since they weren't able to afford much with Oscar Piastri's did not start. And what will also help is that Norris really hasn't sounded panicked, he's just been sounding blunt, taking a leaf out of Max Verstappen's book. And that can only be a good thing. And I would rather Lando just remain that little bit more consistent with his verbiage, since there are more eyes on him now he's a world champion. That honesty will pay him dividends at McLaren, and whilst this weekend was not as rosy as it was in 2025, it was a fact-finding mission. McLaren fans, do not worry yourselves about this. McLaren have been here before. They have the team to be able to get things back on track. They have Rob Marshall. They know what to do. It might take them a while. It might take until Miami again, like in 2024. But I seriously don't expect them to be completely wandering around aimless. They will develop themselves closer to the top two. But speaking of the top two, we do talk about Mercedes and Ferrari. But first, Mercedes. They delivered a weekend which gets the paddock talk going. But I do have a foam of doubt surrounding them. Their reliability and their coordination, their application, their execution was not 100%. As we saw with Kimi Antonelli. Yes, they got the car back on track, which was admirable, but they did have a very shoddy time of it, accruing fines, and quite frankly, they really should have given Kimi a grid drop for the fact that Lando hit that cooler, which then went onto the track and got obliterated by the McLaren. That, I feel, was completely justifiable, a grid drop. But no, just another fine. But either way, what we also saw is that they are not entirely dominant, even though Toto has now admitted, yes, indeed, they were sandbagging that, yes, we might have dropped in an extra 10 kilograms, but what does it really matter now? You know, we got the information as we needed. Yes, absolutely. Toto's a very happy bunny, but not necessarily are the rest of the crowds. But Antonelli, like Martin Brundle said, I think he could be troubling George Russell plenty this year. He got to within 3 seconds, and whilst George might have been coasting, nursing those tyres, Kimi didn't fall away. And he was able to come back from all of this with a repaired car. This weekend wasn't perfect, but they survived it with a 1-2. They must be feeling intense relief and gratitude right now. A team with an engine and chassis that genuinely suits the new era, but Ferrari had race pace in the tank to give them a fight. Their course of strategy being their undoing, I think. And Red Bull still has Verstappen now, with a teammate more readily available to help him out in terms of strategy. But Melbourne gave Mercedes exactly what they wanted. The winter numbers were real. And then there is Ferrari. And even though Charles Leclerc likened the situation to Mario Kart, I don't know whether he could read that mushroom quote as being necessarily a bad thing, because getting a mushroom in Mario Kart is nothing but a good thing, unless you are about to careen off a corner. But I think their weekend was inspirational enough to give the Tifosi hope, yet it wasn't the cleanest of weekends. They were able to have that race start performance as we saw in Bahrain, which meant that 4th and 6th place on the grid did not really matter much, but at the end of the day, their cautious read on strategy, thinking there'd be more failures and safety cars than there actually were, might have been the undoing in being that little bit closer and maybe even splitting the Mercedes. But make no mistake, Friday, their preparation was excellent. Saturday, though, it was awkward. I believe Leclerc cited that there was a software issue which basically reset itself between Q2 and Q3. So they had the Q2 mapping going into Q3, which meant they didn't really fully progress. So yeah, the regulations, software, that really shouldn't be, I know, but that is just a thing we'll have to live with. They will get better at it. Apparently, according to Leclerc, the software is self-learning. Clearly, it got a bonk on the head. But over a single lap, it didn't quite have that authority, but that might change in time. Their race starts were still really good, with Hamilton jumping forward and both drivers looking racy. Lewis especially looking very buoyant afterwards about having much fun with the car and how much pace he still had at the end. Him getting to within a second of his teammate. He was really fired up on the rodeo. He sounded locked in. I believe Team LH will like this. And I think the majority of Formula 1 fans, even though they are very much haranguing the regulations, they are very much speaking out, Ferrari are doing well, Lewis is doing well, that can only be good for the sport. Because, as Vettel said, everyone's a Ferrari fan. But I do think Ferrari left something on the table. I think they're suffering with what McLaren had in 2024. They spent a whole year last year just completely having to rebuild and recover. Now they've got a car which they can actually fight with, albeit they are the lesser of the two as of now. Fred Vasseur said there will be plenty of upgrades and they might not have brought their full aggressive package yet. This is a really solid start where Leclerc managed to get a podium in the first race and Lewis Hamilton matched his best ever Grand Prix result of P4 and almost took Charles. And it just makes you wonder that he might get more feisty over the radio. And a feisty Lewis, if he can actually get it down, might be a good thing. And for those thinking he was going to retire at the end of 2025, yeah, that take aged like raw chicken. He is more motivated than I've seen him in a while. This car looks really, really good. It's just the operations need to be polished that little bit more. The strategy, it was a little bit too nervy. But I'll tell you one driver who wasn't nervy, even though he had a crash in Q1, Max Verstappen. Once again, he had a titanic comeback from P20 to get to P6. And even though he said he didn't enjoy the situation at all, he was just overtaking slower cars, the fact of the matter is, though, is that he gave something to give Red Bull a bit of a smile after the Hadjar of his engine cutting out on him. He gave Red Bull something to think about, a little bit of insight. And even though many are just thinking, you could have had the best product on the grid, Max, you could have had a Mercedes, you stuck with Red Bull, how dare you be loyal and committed to getting them good with the 4 powertrains. They are overperforming that 4 powertrain, as we saw with the 2 Racing Bulls cars in qualifying. But yes, they've still got some work to do, especially with the rear axle randomly locking up, something that Max said never happened to him before in his life. But he can still have a fight back, drag a race into somewhere useful. He managed to squeeze everything out of that car, and his post-race tone was strikingly unbothered too. Being concerned about the gap to Mercedes was not going to change anything. It suggests the champion already in management mode rather than panic mode. He's made it clear many times Red Bull are in a phase of rebuilding here. He's just sticking to his guns. And there was slightly more language about him just talking about the overall strategy, about overall tireage, that there will be things to learn and that he still does not like these regulations, but he was able to make them work. As he said, he can take a shopping trolley and do wonders with it. And now we're all asking the same question. Can we see him going around a Tesco supermarket in a shopping trolley, please? If that doesn't become a bit of viral content, I don't know what will. But yes, once again, Max Verstappen saved the team from depression. And depression is the furthest thing removed you could be describing Haas right now, with Oliver Behrman, P7. That was remarkable for the young guy. Duking it out with Arvid Lindblad, having a real strong competition with the guy. He just looked really polished going into his second full season with the team. Although, admittedly, he's probably having to be quite careful since he is only 2 points away from a race ban. But nevertheless, he spoke about plenty regarding learning things since Bahrain. He is coming on song with these regulations, and even though he's not a big fan of them, he certainly has been able to adapt very quickly, and that will be music to Haas's ears, especially since I think the barrier for entry at Scuderia Ferrari is closed off to him for at least another year. And whilst he too missed out on Q3, he believed the car had serious pace, and it showed over the weekend. This was a serious result for Haas, and they earned it fair and square, and to top it all off, Behrman looked composed rather than flashy, which is often a good thing. Haas appeared to have given him a car that can support proper development, and they executed perfectly. He could become increasingly a proper point scorer, a contender for the top 10 in the standings maybe, but Arvid Lindblad, whoa! Take a bow, Arvid! You are not pulling your punches here, mate. He did admit to some nerves before Friday, but he was immediately quick and looked increasingly comfortable as the weekend went on. Maybe the fact that he's brand new to Formula 1, having not as much time in the 2025 cars, the ground effect cars, as even the rookies of last year, that might stand him in good stead. And the sight of him just giving Max not that easier of a pass, as in waiting a little bit until the Dutchman actually got through, and then banging with Lewis at the start and it coming off cleanly. He's not a kid to be pushed around. That is the F2 spirit that we are quite keen to see, but we got so many last year, it was sort of drowned out. But there's only one rookie this year. We're going to have lots of eyes on this youngster. Because P9 in Q3, that was even better than Isack Hadjar's debut. And yes, he got even as high as 3rd after the start, and whilst he did fall back down to 8th, he wasn't that far behind Behrman in 7th, and he was really fired up to get past Oliver. And even his own race engineer was going, yeah, Arvid, go get him, yeah! As in, he was getting really fired up. This is good news for Racing Bulls. After having lost Isack Hadjar, they'll be fine with Arvid, at least at the beginning. This is a hugely great first impression. And more importantly, I think we saw throughout the entire weekend, this kid's the complete package. Yes, he has that fiery temperament of a rookie, but he is open enough to discussion and realising that he has got a long journey ahead of him. He has got a good head on his shoulders, yet he's also not afraid to duke it out with champions. That is champion. Needless to say, Arvid Lindblad has arrived, and I'm imagining that Christian Horner is a very happy bunny right now. Red Bull's first British hero since the days of DC. Oh, and Bortoletto. Oh my other boy, Bortoletto. I mean, this is an opportunity to play this music. Brazil! And oh yeah, actually, considering that he's the ambassador of Kit Kat, I got another ritual for him too. Thanks to him, Audi scored on debut. He outqualified Hulkenberg too. And if he hadn't had that pit entry issue that left him stranded, I think a spot on the 4th row would have been possible for him. And the team's official reaction is that of this being an incredible result and him being extremely happy. What was clear is that he had outright speed, and one standout moment, I believe, was the team timing his stop behind the virtual safety car to perfection, and that probably secured him not only the ability to remain in the top 10, but at least try and get a run on Arvid Lindblad in P8. He got within half of a second, but he did ultimately back out. I think personally just to bring the car home and to make sure that Audi didn't get itself into a scrap, because I think the bit was very much between his teeth, especially since Hulkenberg conked out before the race started. But I think for Audi's sake, and considering I'm following them this year, first and foremost, this was fantastic. Audi have very much established themselves that they are not just Sauber with a different badge. They've come on song and shown that they are very much worth your attention, getting this on the very first race. I remember Mattia and Jonathan just saying they'd have been happy just to finish the race, and whilst one of their cars didn't finish the race and the other car conked out in qualifying, they actually were able to get 2 points out of this. It could have been 4, but I think they'll be happy with 2. There will be operational wrinkles to iron out, as we saw with reliability, but the Brazilian being able to do this to steady the ship after the German driver was not able to participate, this will be a huge morale booster that both drivers will be able to deliver. And again, they caught the attention of Adrian Newey. That is something else too. And then we round things off with Pierre Gasly. This weekend, it was a success, but it was more of a test of patience rather than genuine performance. Let's be real, Alpine did not show any sparkle that we thought they would have. The Friday, Saturday, that was just a wet fart. They were near 15th, 16th territory, barely getting into Q2. Colapinto getting in within a gnat's breath. I mean, they were better when they finished off last year, but were they going to be getting points considering Haas was executing well? Audi really is doing better than expected. And then, of course, as Racing Bull suddenly surging past? No, it didn't really look that inspiring, but Pierre managed to just stick with it and give this team something to try and focus around. That they can score points. It's slightly better than last year, but the Mercedes engine has not unlocked maximum potential. They've still got some long ways to go to optimize that machine. And I think, according to sources that I saw online, I think it might be down to the fact that even though they've got the same spec of power unit as Mercedes, the works team, they don't run the same computer software. So that might be a key differentiator. That being said, a P10 prevents the team from exiting Melbourne in a sour mood. They got something out of it. And the Frenchman avoided a sour mood, and where his weekend easily could have turned into something completely irrelevant. But let's make it clear, Alpine's not showing headliner pace. But at least Pierre was able to offer something that probably saved Flavio Briatore from absolutely exploding. And one thing's certainly clear, the beef between him and Esteban still goes strong. Those two just don't know when to quit. So there we have it, folks. We'll be in China next week, a track which should in theory be better for the current version of F1, but it wouldn't surprise me if words are had behind the scenes between now and next Friday. But for now, why don't you come on over here and take another look at a video of mine? I'll see you over there.